Welcome, fellow storm riders. This hypnotic storm that is raging worldwide has penetrated the deep, soft underbelly of script readers everywhere, leaving them vacant and wanting something better, which we have. Welcome to Brain Software, episode 72, with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He prefers that we all say sneaked because snuck is not a word. He fetches his daily coffee at Tim Hortons restaurant despite his substantial investment in raw organic coffee beans and roasting equipment. And he's recently used hypnotic suggestion to convince another man to buy a ukulele. Please welcome the man who knows Dr. Doom can single-handedly beat patient pleasure in the octagon, Mike Mandel.
Jeff Show, Riders on the Rash.
Riders on the Rash, that's good. Oh, welcome back,
Here we
Mike.
are. Yes, Chris.
We are here. I have no idea how that intro is going to sound with me like screaming into the microphone.
I don't really care.
To compensate for your
it's
volume.
Content, Chris. It's quality. That's what
Yes,
we're bringing
it
is sheer hypnotic quality, pushing back the bounds of the very edge of the colon of the world with our power.
That's awesome.
I know.
All right, so we just wrapped up a great architecture of hypnosis, which was the June 2016 class.
Oh, bro, wasn't that fantastic?
Yes, and it was fantastic. We had 27 students in the room.
Our first student from Romania. Mario. Hello, Mario. You did a great job. Yep.
Yeah, Mario was fantastic.
We had a psychiatrist from France.
Yes, we did. And we had a real spectrum of people. So for example, I was joking about the ukulele implanting of hypnotic suggestion. We had our new friend Justin, who bought a ukulele. He came in with no hypnotic experience. And then we had all the way out to Roman, who had been one of our first members from June 2013 in our academy.
He gave us a great comment online, remember, on our website. And now he came to Toronto with his lovely daughter and studied with us.
Yeah, and the reason I mention him is because he's an example of somebody who'd been studying hypnosis for more than 11 years at this point. And so people who are complete beginners, people who have tons of experience, are walking away changed with incredible new skills.
And psychiatrists, our second one. And also we got people coming in and, excuse me, a bit of a frog in my throat. Also, the fact that some people in the class were absolute beginners. They had no hypnotic experience. Exactly. And that's fantastic, too. And they all do the same class. So, Chris, do a pitch for November quickly. And we'll get
we're going to jump into some focus content here on the topic of reframing in a moment. Before we do that, and we have some great stuff lined up for you, November 14th through the 18th, that's this year, 2016, that is the next Architecture of Hypnosis class. Monday to Friday in Toronto, and it's the last one where students who take that class are granted lifetime access to the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy. So from that point onward, there will be no more free rides on the MMHA.
And that's going to be a huge saving. And the students love it because they come and jump in the deep end. They do the class with us, do all the amazing stuff. And then they have access to the Academy, over 300 HD videos they can go to and rehearse and practice and learn.
All monthly webinars we do, the Facebook group that's for private access to... for private access to the Facebook group, which is private access only for our students. So yeah, it's awesome. And then that you can access at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/class.
Excellent. Love to see some of you there.
Can you tell I set that URL up when we only had one class?
Brilliant. Yeah. But you pointed it out, so in a way it's okay.
It's okay, exactly. Yeah. So that line, well, I admit it, so it's okay.
Yeah.
So the next class we're also running, it's actually prior to November, so I'm saying it's next as in I'm mentioning it next, but it actually happens September 17th, 18th.
Yes.
This is the graphology class, or handwriting analysis. So it's a Saturday, Sunday, full weekend, amazing class. It's in Toronto. Check it out on our website.
Yeah, let me just say, Chris, I jump in here. Sorry to talk over you there, but for those of you wondering about this, listen, guys, I've been a professional handwriting specialist and analyst since 1993. I've done this forensically, consulted to numerous police services. In fact, yesterday I did a training at a conference that was put on by York Regional Police north of Toronto, and graphology, numerous people came up and said, I want to learn this. It blows my mind.
Yeah, it's an amazing skill. It's something people have really been enjoying. What I would encourage you to do, if you want to learn more, is just go to our website. I believe the link is MikeMandelHypnosis.com/handwriting. I think I set it up that way. If it's not handwriting, it's graphology. And if it's not there, you'll find it in the menu, because the menu has a tab called training. And if you just click the training tab,
you'll find it. We want to see you in Toronto.
The reason I point this out is there's a video there that Mike uses to explain a lot of the basic concepts that you already know about handwriting. And when he shows you that you already know this stuff, then it just makes it so much easier to want to learn more.
And the writing never lies.
It doesn't. In fact, I sent you a sample yesterday.
Yeah.
It kind of spooked me out because...
it should have. There's a lot of red flags in it.
Yeah. It's somebody that teaches my kids, and I just thought, whoa, there was some stuff there I wanted your second opinion on. And
right, which of course is the truth.
Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, so let's jump
right into content.
We've got a great set of discussions here on the topic of reframing.
Reframing, Chris.
Let's start with it. What is reframing, Mike?
Such an important topic.
Why should people care? We're not talking about picture frames.
It can change your life, although in some cases we are. Yeah. Back in the early days of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, some classic texts were written, including Neuro-Linguistic Programming and the Structure of Hypnosis, which is still brilliant, the original NLP book, Frogs and the Princes, and one was just called Reframing.
Which I have on my bookshelf here.
On the cover, that's what you're looking over my head.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. You keep talking.
On the cover, you'll notice there's something like, it looks like a beach, and just some elements like shells and stuff lying on the beach. And you look at it more closely, it's a unicorn.
Here it is.
There it is. Here, let me see it. I would see if I recall. I'm right. It is shells and things, and it is a unicorn with a nautilus spire coming out of its head. And this, again, is Bandler and Grinder. It's a classic book on the reframe. Now, the reframe is a way of changing meaning. In fact, we all do it all the time, but if you do it with intention, if you do it on purpose, your life can be a lot better. There is content reframing, and there is context reframing, and let's just explain the difference.
Yeah, definitely. So content reframing, let me see if I get this correct. This is where you're changing the meaning of a situation without changing the content in it. So a classic example of this might be the glass is half empty versus, I said half. The glass is half empty versus the glass is half full.
Right. What is the different meaning of the content that is there? And also when we're doing literal reframes and sticking pictures on imaginary walls and so on, that too is content reframing because we're messing with the submodalities and making changes. Now, context reframing is when is the behavior or thing appropriate, changing it. Mm-hmm. So finding something that's appropriate in a situation changes the context. So, and the example I love to give, first I should say that context, all meaning is derived from context. Without context, nothing has a meaning.
Right.
Nothing has a meaning without context. Maybe I'll say that a different way. Without context, there is no meaning whatsoever.
Right.
So you look at something, the classic example Chris and I use in Toronto. If I paint my face blue and run down the street screaming at the top of my lungs, they will put me in the Clark Institute of Psychiatry, and rightly so. However, if I paint my face blue and go to a Toronto Maple Leafs hockey game and scream, this is not only acceptable behavior,
but you're an enthusiastic fan.
Right. It's encouraged. It's encouraged.
Yeah.
So the behavior is identical, but the context changes the meaning of the behavior from insanity to fandom.
I love that you point that out. So it made me think immediately of, let's say, somebody is walking down the street completely by themselves, not wearing any headphones.
I thought you say naked for some reason.
No. Although that would be even funnier.
Yeah.
So imagine somebody just poker face, just keeping to themselves, walking down the street. All of a sudden, they just burst out in hilarious laughter. They'd be thought as insane, right?
Most likely so,
now,
yes.
if you're sitting at a pub talking with your friends and everyone's talking and you burst out into laughter, it's totally normal because somebody was probably telling a joke.
So
or if you're listening to our podcast, it's totally normal.
That's right. And you're bang on with that, Chris. I can remember years ago traveling a train, British Rail in England, and there was a man across from me, and he just kept bursting out laughing and couldn't stop. He could not stop. And I finally went over. He looked like Ray, who was just in our training, very similar to him, a slim man with glasses and a friendly guy. And I said, I couldn't help noticing you're laughing. He said, it's this book I'm reading. The book was called Alternative Wilt, W-I-L-T, The Alternative Wilt. And it made him laugh so much, I bought the book and discovered I, too, was incapable of reading it without laughing out loud. So
that's great.
One must determine the context before we do anything. Now, realize, if we're going to have great lives, there are ways of using reframing as an advantage. For example, let's say you got a lot of crap that's happened to you in your life. You know, you were abused or beaten up or bullied incessantly like I was as a kid, beaten up and bullied and just trounced by other kids. I don't carry that around and say the meaning is I am a victim.
Yeah, exactly.
I attract problems. People want to hurt me. I've reframed that was then. That's gone.
And that's an example of content reframing.
Yes.
Because the content is unchanged. You're just changing the way that it's internally represented.
But is it
in your
content
mind.
reframing? Is it?
Well, it's not really context reframing, is it? Although it's blurry here.
Right, yeah. And you'll run into this a lot. I asked John Grinder himself, I said, in the classic 6-step reframe, NLP thing for parts integration, I said, where's the reframe in it?
Well, there isn't really.
And he went, good question.
Yeah.
So
that's a bit into the weeds of NLP history.
Yeah.
But in the case of this content here is, you could definitely make the case it's a content reframe because, okay, you were bullied as a kid.
Right.
So when you think about that and you apply the reframe, which you haven't yet
right, well, I could say the
specified,
reframe could be, instead of, I am a victim, it is, I'm a survivor.
Right.
You know? I'm a tough guy. I overcame that.
Right.
I'm an overcomer.
I got through it.
Yeah, and these all become identity statements as well, which are very, very powerful statements.
Actually, let's jump right into that then, because I think we talked in the Architecture of Hypnosis last week about Dilt's logical levels.
Yes, I did.
And so let's go through them super quick and then explain why the identity reframe is so important.
Okay, Robert Dilt's logical levels are a really useful tool, and it's just 6 different ways of looking at things. So each level above takes in everything below. So they're on a hierarchy. So at the bottom we have environment.
Right.
And people who are stuck at the level of environment complain about things happening to them all the time.
Oh, I can't get a raise because my
job
my
sucks.
boss doesn't
Everybody
like me.
picks on me.
Yeah.
It always rains.
Yeah.
This kind of thing.
They always hire someone else for the job.
They
whatever it
treat
is.
life as though it is happening to them. Then above that is the level of behavior. When you take on behaviors,
You're responsible for your own behavior and the outcomes.
right, and you are then able to interact with your environment and change it.
Right.
So let's say your behavior is every time somebody mocks you, you make some zinger of a put down, they stop doing it quickly and your environment changes. So now we go above behavior into capability, which is really just ability.
Right, because you need to have the abilities so that you can behave differently.
Right, you can't behave in a way that you're not capable
So
of.
if you learn new communication skills, for example, you can now behave differently.
Like axe hand and chin jab and whip kick to
firing
the knee.
great zingers at people. When
Yes.
Yeah.
All of those are capabilities that are then available for your behavior
Right.
to change your environment. Well, above behavior, we have beliefs.
Beliefs, right.
And the old adage is, whether you say you believe or, whether something you can or can't do something, you're probably right. So
Right.
our belief will affect the resources that are available to us. So we change our beliefs about what's possible and what we can and cannot do.
I can learn new communication skills.
I am learning new
am
communication
learning,
skills.
right.
Then it's not a modal operative possibility,
I
but it's
love
something that's
learning
happening.
new communication
Yes.
skills.
And learning new communication skills loves me too.
I love dealing with people.
That's good. So now what do we got above that, Chris? What do we got above beliefs?
Then we have identity,
Identity.
and that's why we wanted to get to it. So identity is the I am statements.
Right.
The classic, I am a smoker.
Right.
I am an alcoholic, or whatever it is. Right.
And that's the one AA teaches you
Right.
to say, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic. And that's terrible. I don't agree with that at all.
Right.
You're labeling behavior, something you're doing, as identity. So now back to all this. If you reframe your identity,
Right.
you have really done an amazing thing. And I'll give an example, Chris, one you're well aware of. Years ago, when I started doing stage hypnosis and mentalism, January 29th, 1975, there was virtually nobody else in Canada doing this. And very few in the U.S. were doing this full-time professionally. So I started touring and doing these shows in colleges, universities, high schools, etc., and bars. By 1980, other people started to take note, hey, this is a really cool job.
Yeah.
I could do that too. Unfortunately, many of them started showing up at my shows, taking extensive notes and cloning what I was doing, which infuriated me. Then they started cloning each other, which I enjoyed more because the standard was dropping and dropping. There was one guy, Chris, when I was trying to push the price up, trying and failing, by the way, he would work just for the price of a hotel room.
Jeez.
So he just had to be on stage. Now, how do I compete with that when I'm asking X number of dollars and you got a guy who doesn't want anything?
It's your typical commodity problem, right? If your skill or your whatever you're selling, like gold is a commodity, lead is a commodity, wheat is a commodity. If being a stage hypnotist is just a commodity, there's no profit in it.
Right, and that's the problem. So all of a sudden, the market was getting flooded with low-level cowboy hypnotists who weren't really especially skilled, but all the audience remembers is, he made him think he was pregnant. It was hilarious. This kind of stuff,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Lowest common denominator stuff. So what happened was The market was getting so flooded, I was running out of work. And I made a reframe. One day, having read Marilyn Vosavant's Brain Building, I suddenly recognized I'm not a stage hypnotist. There's a chunk higher than that. I am a hypnotist, which is a bigger chunk. And an even bigger chunk is I am a communicator. Hypnosis is just one aspect of this. So I began writing for, a magazine, writing wine stuff.
And the key here is that this is an identity statement reframe.
Right.
You change the way
my identity.
Right.
As a communicator, I don't have to do high school hypnosis shows if I don't want. I can teach hypnosis at University of Toronto. I can lecture corporations. I can write wine blogs. I can do all this stuff.
I think it's worth pointing out, since we talked about chunking up, so from stage hypnotist to hypnotist to
communicator. Yes,
communicator.
Explain that, yes.
Well, that's essentially, if you think about reframing as a metaphor for how you frame a photo or a video, this is like zooming out.
Yeah.
So this is saying, I was too zoomed in on that stage in that picture.
Beautiful. Zoom
out, I'm a hypnotist. Zoom out even more, I'm a communicator.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Beautiful. So start thinking in terms of how can you reframe your life. The as-if frame is a great reframe. How would you move, act, behave if you were an amazing speaker, if you already are a successful human being?
Right.
What will you do differently?
You're shifting the focus to where you've already overcome something or succeeded in some goal. Another one is, and we've talked about the smoker, so if a smoker says, I am a smoker, instead of reframing that, and that's why we did the Dilt's logical levels.
Right. I am a person who smokes.
Right. If we reframe that down to a behavior, then it's way easier to fix, right? I am someone who engages in smoking, so I can ask myself the right empowering questions, change it, and no longer engage in that.
Yeah, push it out with new behaviors.
Right. And you can not only push the identity down to a behavior, so instead of I'm a smoker, I'm someone who used to smoke, phrase it as past tense. You can take on a new identity too while you're at it, right?
Absolutely. One that's empowering.
I'm a healthy liver.
I'm a healthy pancreas.
Not the organ.
All right, what's next? What do we got here? How are we doing on time?
So we talked about... did we talk yet about framing things as in the past? Yes, we did.
Let's talk about the literal reframe, and that'll probably...
Let's do the literal reframe, and if there's time, we need to talk about irrelevant content to eliminate clutter from your life.
Let's do the literal reframe, and then we'll get right to that. That's a good point. The literal reframe is if something bothers you, and I'll give you the thumbnail sketch. Let's say you had a really bad argument with a person, and you just don't like them, you can't stand them, and every time you think of them, the fusiform gyrus in your brain fires and rankles you when you see anybody who remotely resembles them. What you can do is take an incident, an event, something painful, annoying, watch the event in your mind like a movie, then freeze frame it at the peak moment in the movie that indicates exactly what's going on. So if somebody hit you, you can freeze it at the moment that they're hitting you. Then push yourself back from it in your mind so you're not feeling it, you're seeing yourself in the picture, you're dissociating into the picture. Now reach out with your physical hands in front of you with your eyes closed and grab the edges of this frame and squeeze this thing down from top to bottom and side to side and make it into a smaller picture.
Like you're zooming out on an iPad.
Like you're zooming out, but use your hands to crunch this picture in. Then change it to black and white and grainy, all grayscale. So it's flat and you're in it. Now put a frame around it, a literal frame in your mind. And not a physical frame, but as though there's a picture frame.
So imagine you're looking at a squished down picture that's grainy black and white. Now
with
you're putting a frame around it.
It could be elaborate, carved wood. It could be metal and simple, whatever. Then hang it on an imaginary wall somewhere. Put a museum light above it and turn the light on, which metaphorically sheds new light on it.
Right.
Then pause for a second, shake your body, move around, and check that event. You'll discover it doesn't bother you anymore. And as I've told clients, put it in your iPhone to remind you. Check it again in a week.
Yeah, put it in
Check
your calendar.
Check it next year. It won't bother you. By changing the frame itself, putting a different frame, by shrinking it, changing the intensity, it's believed you're changing the protein molecule kinase C that actually stores the memory.
And if you really want to check this for yourself, make sure you assign a number from 1 to 10.
Right.
With subjective units of distress. How much does this situation bother me? How bad can I make it when I think about it right now?
And naturally, I wouldn't use this for something like a screaming snake phobia, but I would use it for an argument, something that bothered me, an appointment that didn't go well, anything.
Something you would probably get over anyway, and this will just do it for you a whole lot faster.
Stick it on that wall.
Right.
Let's talk about this.
The irrelevance.
Irrelevance, yeah.
I think this is kind of irrelevant to the discussion.
Yeah,
No,
I was anticipating that.
So Mike and I were talking before the podcast about how you can reframe things as irrelevant to eliminate clutter from your life. So, you have any example? I have one example. Do you have one?
No, bring it on right away. I know the one you're going to say. It's a good one.
Yeah, so yesterday in the morning, my wife and I, we were talking about next year in school and what class the kids are going to be in, because it's a small school, so there's going to be certain split classes, and is one daughter going to be in such and such a split class, or, is it going to be a grade 5, 6, or is it going to be a grade 6, 7 split, or whatever it is. And we're thinking about this, and I stopped at some point, and I just looked at her and I said, none of this is something we have any control over whatsoever. We're probably wasting our time focusing any energy to try to predict, and try is correct here because we can't correctly predict. We have no predictive ability. It's all luck of the draw of whatever class the kids are in and whether they're with those rambunctious kids or not. What we can do, though, is focus on how are we going to respond to it. So if they're put into a particular class with a bunch of, let's say, kids who are known to be rambunctious, how can we then deal with that so it doesn't affect our kids in a negative way?
Right. So there's only certain things you can anticipate here. Everything else becomes irrelevant clutter and wastes your time to keep going round and round and round. And you'll hear this with people who don't have an exit strategy on different topics.
Yes.
People like Ken Sweat. But you did not. You didn't. So how do you deal with it, Chris? How do you reframe that?
Well, I just reframed it like a focus on what we can control rather than what we can't control. So if we're going to invest energy in some sort of discussion, unless it's fun, which it wasn't. It was more like, it was worry. It was a source of anxiety a little bit for my wife.
And there comes a time you recognize this is irrelevant. I can't control it. Do you physically push it out in your mind? Like put your hand
Well,
in?
you know what? Here's the reframe. You can say to somebody, how does this make you feel? Or it makes me feel really uncomfortable with such and such. Oh, so you're uncomfortable with not knowing what's going to happen. And you've been there before, right? Are you comfortable with that level of discomfort that you've experienced before? And are you comfortable knowing that whatever level of discomfort you have now, you will be able to deal with it when it happens?
Nice.
Because you've dealt with it before.
Right.
So these, I don't know.
It's good. It makes total sense. Which leads us to today's empowering question I have for you. And then Chris is going to give you our most recent update.
How did this work out so well, Mike? Perfect.
Here's the empowering question. And listen carefully. What is the biggest time waster in your life, and what are you going to do by putting something else in its place that's useful? Let me reframe that and rephrase it for you. When you look at your life, where are you wasting the most time, and what are you going to put in its place that is entirely empowering and useful? And now, the Gus Grissom update.
There has been another Gus Grissom sighting. He's been spotted outside St. Basil's Church next to Brennan Hall at the University of Toronto by Captain Rick Green of Michigan. Rick reported that he was attending the Architecture of Hypnosis course as an alumni guest and walked outside. He saw a man wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs Tim Horton number 7 jersey talking to a nun. When the man turned around, it was Gus Grissom. Grissom noticed he'd been spotted and ran into the church. Green is skilled at surveillance and pursued him, but somehow Grissom managed to slip away. Rick Green reported that Gus Grissom looked to be in good health, although he seemed tired. He also reported that he was surprised because he didn't know Grissom was a Catholic, and he thought the man was more of a Detroit Red Wings fan.
Okay, Chris, I have the metaphor for today, and it is the tour from hell. In 1999, I had the worst hypnosis tour of my life. I had to go to England. Actually, it was my 5th tour there, doing 12 universities and colleges in 2 weeks. Kiel, Stoke-on-Trent, Cardiff, and so on. It was great. But the plane was delayed leaving out of Toronto. We sat in the runway for 2 hours. The pilot came on and said, there's a panel door open, according to the dash here, and we know it's only the light, it's not the panel. But we can't leave until it's fixed. We were now past the 11 p.m. time that planes can leave, because to leave, you have to apply so much power you break noise violations after 11 p.m. Landing is quiet because you're not applying full power. We had to exit the plane. By the time we got out of the plane, the baggage handlers had gone, and they pushed everything backwards through the positions. I got home at nearly 3 a.m. The next day, came back to try again, and it was a try. We got airborne. got over eastern Canada. The East Indian man across the aisle from me stood up to use the washroom to walk down the hall, collapsed, had a heart attack in the aisle right beside me, slipped through my hand as I went to catch him. Dead in the aisle. They said, is there a doctor on board? There was an Eastern European urologist and a medical student. She runs back, begins attempting to revive him. She said, I need the atropine and the lidocaine from the medical case. They wouldn't give it to her. They said, no one's allowed to open this. She said, I'm a doctor. This man is vital signs absent. They moved me out of the way so they can work on this guy, put me in a vacant first-class spot. They said, we're turning back. We turned back, and then we didn't turn back. We kept going. We were going to land in Gander, Newfoundland. Instead, we went back all the way to Heathrow. Landed at Heathrow, had to wait. They'd put the man in the internal elevator of the 747 into the hold in a body bag. We had to wait for the medical officer to clear the plane before we could leave. That's how the tour started. The other highlights of the tour were I got a broken nose on stage. A man turned around with a steel chair, caught me in the bridge of the nose, spent 3 hours in Royal Berkshire Hospital. Then to Paul Giles' doctor when they would not take my Thomas Cook traveler's checks or my $2 million of health insurance. They wouldn't take it. Loads of fun. Then I got the flu while I had a broken nose. Up in my room, damp, cold, broken nose, flu, feeling like a 5-year-old. Still did the shows. Really annoying. And the final thing was I got in at 3 a.m. from Cardiff. Paul Giles drops me outside my bed and breakfast in Tilehurst. They'd forgotten I was coming home, and this 3-story house was in absolute darkness. I'd only stayed there one night, and I had to find my way to my distant room on this upper floor, off the 3rd floor, in total darkness through coat racks and stairwells and, ghosts and hideous things. It took like 40 minutes to find my room. And when I phoned home, my wife said the Volvo's engine had seized, the rad had broken, and it was $5,000 damage. That was my last hypnosis tour of England, the tour from hell.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been Brain Software Podcast episode number 72 with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. Make sure you give us a 5-star rating if you think we deserve it on iTunes. Visit our website, MikeMandelHypnosis.com. Check out all the awesome training that we have for you, and we'll see you in the next podcast.
Hey, man. Dave Ambrose, People's Physicist here, dude. Just zipped in from the 17th dimension to answer your questions, man. Taking all your questions on physics and particles and all kinds of stuff like that, dude. Well, here's out of my mailbag today. Questions come in. Who was the better physicist, Richard Feynman or Niels Bohr? Dude, that's a no-brainer, man. Feynman was, awesome. Niels Bohr, his name was Niels. I mean, the guy was obviously a dick, man. So, keep it up, man. Keep the neutrinos coming down and watch out for the quantum entanglement in your boxers, dude. Till then, I'll just say, kill Pizixum.